Hello there, and welcome to new episode of the Midnight Scientists. I'm so glad you could join me on a soothing journey to consciousness. Whether you've settled into bed, dimmed the lights, or are simply resting your eyes for a moment, this is your quiet space to unwind. Tonight, we're going to drift into one of life's deepest and most beautiful mysteries. We're going to softly ask the question, what is consciousness really? There's no need to find an answer. The purpose is not to solve the puzzle, but to wonder at its shape, to feel its edges as we gently drift towards sleep. So, take a slow, easy breath. Let your shoulders soften, and let's begin our journey. Imagine looking in a mirror. You see your face, and behind the eyes in the reflection, there is you, the observer, the one feeling the coolness of the air, the one hearing my voice, the one thinking thoughts. That inner world, with all its colors, feelings, and sensations, is your consciousness. It's the most familiar thing in the world, and yet it's the greatest puzzle in science. This puzzle is often called the hard problem. The easy problems, which are still incredibly difficult, involve figuring out how the brain processes information, how you recognize a face, or learn a new skill. But the hard problem is different. It asks, why does all that processing feel like anything? Why is there a subjective, inner experience at all? Why do we have this private movie playing inside our heads? That internal feeling, the taste of a strawberry, the warmth of the sun, the specific shade of blue in the evening sky, is what philosophers call qualia. We can scan a brain and see neurons firing when a person sees the color red, but we can't see the redness itself. That experience is private, internal, and the central mystery we are exploring tonight. To understand it, people have looked everywhere, starting with our history. Ancient civilizations had beautiful ways of describing this inner life. The Egyptians spoke of the Bia, a soul-like bird that could travel in dreams. Hindu philosophy taught of Atman, an individual consciousness that was part of the universal consciousness. Brahman, like a drop of water returning to the ocean. Philosophies like Buddhism suggested that the self we feel so strongly might be more like a flowing river than a solid stone, a process rather than a thing. Later, thinkers like René Descartes in the 17th century placed the puzzle at the center of modern thought. He famously declared, "I think, therefore I am," realizing that the one thing he could not doubt was his own consciousness. This led him to the idea of dualism, that the mind is a non-physical, thinking thing, separate from the physical body. But this left a haunting question that remains with us today. If the mind and body are separate, how do they interact? How does a feeling of sadness produce real tears? This question guides us to the brain itself, the 3-pound universe inside our skulls. It's a network of some 86 billion neurons, constantly communicating in a silent electrical storm. Scientists have found clues about where consciousness might live. Certain networks, like the default mode network, become active when our mind wanders, daydreaming or remembering, constructing our sense of self. The thalamus acts as a central relay station, gathering sensory information and broadcasting it to the wider cortex. One popular idea is the global workspace theory. It imagines the brain as a dark theater. Countless processes happen unconsciously, behind the scenes. But when a piece of information is important enough, it gets broadcast onto a brightly lit stage, becoming available to the entire brain. This entry into the global workspace, the theory suggests, is what we experience as a conscious thought or sensation. It explains why we can only focus on one or two things at a time. The stage is only so big. But our understanding is also shaped by situations where consciousness behaves in strange ways. Consider split-brain patients whose two brain hemispheres are surgically separated. In experiments, one hemisphere can be shown an image that the other hemisphere is completely unaware of, suggesting two separate streams of awareness in one mind. Or consider the profound condition of locked-in syndrome, where a person is fully conscious but unable to move. For years, they were thought to be unaware, but new technology has allowed some to communicate, revealing a rich inner world hidden behind a silent exterior. These cases are humbling, showing us that consciousness can persist even when all outward signs are gone, and that our mind is a fragile and complex construction. And this construction doesn't just stay in one mode. Consciousness is a shapeshifter. Think of a flow state when you're so absorbed in an activity that your sense of self and time melts away. Compare that to highway hypnosis, where you drive for miles on autopilot, with your conscious mind seemingly checked out. Both are forms of waking consciousness, just with the dial turned to different settings. Then, as we begin to drift off, we enter the world of sleep. It's not just an off switch, it's a carefully choreographed ballet of brain states. We descend into deep, slow-wave sleep, where our bodies restore themselves and consciousness is almost entirely absent. Then, we rise into REM sleep, rapid eye movement. Here, our brain activity looks almost identical to when we're awake. Our eyes dart back and forth, and we experience the vivid, story-like, and often bizarre worlds of our dreams. Dreams are a form of consciousness, and sometimes, in a remarkable twist, we can become aware that we are dreaming while still in the dream. This is called lucid dreaming, a state where you can observe and even influence the dream world, like becoming the director of your own inner movie. This flexibility of the mind is also explored through ancient practices like meditation. Experienced meditators often report a quieting of the inner narrator, a dissolving of the sense of a separate self, leaving only a vast, peaceful awareness. It suggests that our baseline state of consciousness, with its constant chatter, is just one possibility among many. So, where does this leave us? Theories abound. Some, like integrated information theory, propose that consciousness is a measure of a system's complexity and interconnectedness, suggesting that anything, from a brain to a sophisticated computer, could potentially be conscious. Others argue that consciousness is deeply tied to having a body, that we think with our physical selves, not just our brains. And some thinkers even propose that we have it all backwards. This idea, called panpsychism, suggests that consciousness isn't produced by complex brains, but is a fundamental property of the universe, like gravity or mass. In this view, even an electron might have a tiny spark of inner experience, and our brains are just complex receivers that tune into it. This brings us to the quiet companion of consciousness, the self, that feeling of I that sits at the center of your experience. Neuroscience suggests this self is a story, a brilliant narrative woven together by your brain, primarily in that default mode network, to create a stable sense of identity through time. This story is surprisingly flexible. In the famous rubber hand illusion, a person can be tricked into feeling a fake hand is their own, showing that our brain's model of our body is constantly being updated. This idea of the self as a story or a process is not new. It's a cornerstone of Buddhist philosophy, which teaches that looking for a permanent, unchanging self is like looking for the river itself, separate from the flowing water. The self is the flow. And what of other selves? We look at our pets and we feel a connection. Science is now beginning to confirm what pet owners have always known. Animals have rich inner lives. From the complex problem-solving of an octopus, whose mind is distributed through its arms, to the strategic thinking of crows, who can plan for the future. The evidence for animal consciousness is all around us. They may not be conscious in the same way we are, but their experience of the world is no less real. This naturally leads us to the question of artificial intelligence. Could a machine ever be conscious? An AI can be incredibly intelligent. It can beat a grandmaster at chess or write a poem, but does it feel anything? The famous Chinese room thought experiment suggests it might not. A person could follow a set of rules to translate Chinese perfectly without understanding a word of it. An AI, the argument goes, is just doing the same, manipulating symbols without any subjective awareness. For now, the consensus is that AI is a powerful simulation, but the inner lights are off. So we are left with the great arc of this mystery. Consciousness seems to have emerged gradually throughout evolution, a tool that helped living things survive and navigate an increasingly complex world. It flickered to life in ancient oceans and grew into the complex self-awareness we experience today. And this brings us to the final quiet question. Where does consciousness go when we die? Science tells us that as the brain ceases to function, the biological basis for consciousness fades away. The symphony of neurons falls silent. Yet, reports of near-death experiences, with their common themes of bright lights and overwhelming peace, offer a tantalizing, though unproven, glimpse into the mind's final moments. Perhaps they are the brain's last, beautiful dream. Or perhaps, as some spiritual traditions and fringe scientific theories suggest, consciousness is more fundamental, and our brains are just temporary receivers for a signal that resonates throughout the cosmos. We don't have the answer, and maybe we never will. But the value is not in solving the mystery. It is in the wondering. The very fact that you and I can ponder this question is the most profound expression of consciousness itself. For a brief moment in the history of the universe, it has become aware of itself through you. As our journey comes to a close, let the questions dissolve. Let them become soft clouds in a quiet sky. There is nothing to figure out tonight. There is only rest. Let your thoughts drift like leaves on a still pond. Notice the gentle rhythm of your breath, in and out. Thank you for spending this time with me. If you've enjoyed this restful exploration, a like or subscribe is always deeply appreciated. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I love imagining this community of quiet minds, all drifting off under different stars. Now, let the silence cradle you. Sleep well, my dear listener. See you in the next episode.